quotes. So any of the reserved characters, like hash symbols, or where you want a double quote inside it, you have to escape it. Like, if you want to print out a double quote, you've got to put backslash double quote to print it. If you want to print out an ampersand, you've got to do a backslash ampersand to sort of print that. And it's a bit messy for doing large prints. So if you're sending back a big sort of print layout, you're best not using servlets. That's where JSP's sort of good for, and that's how they're basically based around HTML with embedded Java. Here, we've got Java really with embedded HTML being sort of printed out. Servlets are best for just doing the grunt work in the background. They're the things that actually do the work about making connections, generating the data, and we'll see later on with a design pattern called MVC how this thing the controller will actually deal with handling the data and then send the results out to a formatter, which will particularly be a JSP one. Most other languages like PHP and ASP, they tend to blur the boundaries between the two. And you end up with what looks like HTML, and then let's say a special tag that says I'm now going into the programming language itself, and then a tag to say I'm at the end of that. And that's what JSP sort of does. But we'll have a look at, as I say, sort of both approaches as we go through. In this case, all it's generating is just, there's no input coming into it, it's not picking up on any input. It's just generating a head, a body with an H1 test, and a simple servlet for testing, so that when you run it, you get H1 with a sort of message inside it. Nothing sort of too much in there. A little note about debugging. If ever you just use a standard print statement, like a system out print, that doesn't get sent back to the browser. The only thing, when you do a print, it appears on the console of the wherever the server is. It doesn't get sent back to the user. So you can use print statements, but they only appear on the desktop. It's better to use some sort of logger that logs messages, like the log4j that can write the sort of data out to it. Because typically something can be going wrong. You might have some sort of some data being generated inside your code, and because you're only sending back HTML in there, you don't necessarily know what's happening. So if you want some debug messages as to actual processing, then we've got to use one of these sort of techniques. It may be that you sent it back as HTML, but it's unlikely. You're probably either going to have to do a print statement or some sort of log one to sort of use that. The Tomcat from version 7 onwards, so it won't really sort of affect you unless you're using very early versions of Tomcat. The name of the servlet can be given inside the actual Java code with this annotation. If you just say at the top of your code @web servlet and then give the address of it, that's what you want this servlet to be known as to the outside world. So when the outside world opens up your app name, so that's this app name here, that's the thing that you can name in the app, in the @web servlet call. You can give my address inside it. So it doesn't have to be the name of the actual Java program. It can be any name you like. So although there I've called it /myaddress, the actual class was called myservlet, they don't have to be the same thing. It just means that your URL has now got that my address to get there. And we had that just at the beginning of the actual sort of code. The web servlet there was called test1, and you'll invoke it with test1 as opposed to that test servlet. It's just an outside name for it. Now this is I say fairly new. It's been in since version 7 of Tomcat. It may be that if you are using an older version of Tomcat, or you're asked to maintain an older version of Tomcat, you haven't got this annotation that's only sort of available in 7. And it used to be that they're held inside this web.xml configuration file, which I don't know whether I can perhaps bring one up on the fly here. No, I've not brought one in. I'll do it in the, I'll show in the lab. I haven't actually got a dynamic project available there. But when you look in the web.xml, you'll see that some of that configuration is there. What they're moving away from is to try and sort of stop using this web.xml explicitly and because people cocked it up basically. They sort of play around with this config file and then find out that their web application didn't work. It's best to let the software itself deal with it. Best to let in this case, the web annotation deal with it. But only to sort of be aware of that if you're using an earlier version somewhere outside. So that was the idea of using that sort of annotation. Used to be, yeah, this used to be the idea of building it inside the web.xml. You had to give all things like naming what the server's name was, where it was actually, which class it was in, all that sort of thing. We don't have to do that now. So I think you can safely ignore that for the moment unless you're on a very early version of Tomcat. The more useful thing that we'll be using in the lab, the form data, picking up data off this form for it. You've got to be able, I'm not going to go over the HTML part, but you've got to be able to somehow create this in HTML. Create a form in HTML that you initially send to the user, they fill it in, click on go, send, submit, whatever. You'll put in there an action that will specify where your servlet is. And either you can just give that web URL that we had in the web servlet annotation, or you can give a full URL to get into it. And the actual form that you're sending back goes inside your web content folder. Again, you'll try that out in the lab for it. The thing that we're going to be interested in the Java is picking up these parameters, is this request.get parameter. And I know that some people on the mobile app development have started using some of these demos already in some of the code when we talked to a server last week. But you just put in a request.get parameter, and you name the parameter that you want. So for example, if I had a form, really sort of basic form, with an input box, the name of this input box is just referred to as param1, the name of this input box is referred to as param2. That's what my basic form looks like. The action there saying, pass this off to something called 3params servlet at the other end. At the other side, my servlet there, the app web servlet called 3params, so that's the thing that's linking the two in. But the things in red here are the bits that are actually picking up your data. If you're implementing this do-get, in comes a request object, and you get this parameter, param1, param2, param3. Now in this case, all I'm doing is sending it back to the user. My out.print line says send back HTML body, an H1 with whatever the title is, then an unordered list with these parameters in. So send back whatever their parameter was, just to more or less just sort of confirm. Typically what you do is at this point, you'll have extracted the data and you'll be doing something with it. You'll extract out whatever param1 is and do something with it. In this case, all it's done is sent it back. So we sent it back as that unordered list with the bold things in front. So an unordered list, bold param1, and then whatever param1 parameter was, bold for param2, and the other ones. So we've got that list going back. Yeah, trivial example. What we're really interested in is how these things hold together. How you sort of write a form, get the servlet to handle it, pick up the parameters. We'll just sort of getting the things working together at the start. Now that's about what we'll be doing in the lab, is getting up to that. But I want to do, we'll do that hopefully in the first hour. But then I want to bring in a bit about interacting with the database. digging into the database to read some sort of data out of it, say some of that film data, and then generating some output from it. And I suspect most of the lab will be taken up with a bit more sort of advanced work for the extra lab for it. Because you'll find that the setup of this is relatively trivial. Just as an intro to JSP, I'm not going to do a lot on this. I'm going to sort of finish off in about 5 minutes here. Simple applications, just use servlets directly. That's the sort of things that we've just been looking at there. It may be that you call servlet code indirectly through some sort of utility class. Really what we want to get onto using, and the thing that we'll be aiming at in the assignment, is to use more use of these things called Java beans. Not too much on them just sort of for now, but what we'll be working on is a combination of servlet and JSP, where rather than generating your HTML inside the servlet, you'll have your client will send you data over to the server, and this will go into a servlet which will process the data. It will